Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekhachari Wagh, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Today we are going to discuss the module Non-Brahmanical Approach to the Study of Indian Society, the Perspective of Mahatma Phule. This module has been written by Deepthi Gokhale Oak, a research scientist at Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. The perspective of Mahatma Phule is important to students studying sociology in India because for a very long time Indian sociology has ignored the writings of scholars, especially the radical reformers who have very centrally questioned and critiqued the manner of formation of society in India. Especially Mahatma Phule's perspective rejects, questions the Brahmanical notion of history from a Shudra Ati-Shudra perspective. And therefore, as students of sociology, it becomes important to study the perspective of Mahatma Phule. Objectives: to introduce the students to the non-Brahmanical approach. 2. To familiarize students with the contributions of Mahatma Phule. 3. To acquaint the students with the perspectives of Mahatma Phule. Introduction. A non-Brahmanical approach to the study of society in India is based on the rejection of Brahmanical history from the Shudra Ati-Shudra perspective. Indian society was hierarchically structured according to the Varna system, where ancient lawmaker Manu, who is considered the architect of Brahmanical tradition, wrote in his Manusmriti, "When a Brahman is born, he springs to light above the world. He is the chief of all creatures, entitled by the eminence of birth to the wealth of the world." The religious practices and beliefs of ancient India, as reflected in the Vedas and the Upanishads and believed by the Hindus, especially the Brahmins, were based on caste structure and various forms of pantheism. The rules of purity and pollution, like untouchability and pollution, were rigorously followed. The Hindu ideology believed in the Varna system, with Manusmriti and Bhagavad Gita interpreting Varna in terms of occupation. Brahmins could engage in education, both teaching and learning, as well as priesthood. Kshatriyas in military or police forces and administration. Vaishyas could engage in trade or cultivation. However, occupations of Shudras were not mentioned. This might have meant that they could undertake any of the occupations not prescribed to the other three Varnas. Generally, they were duty bound to serve the other three. This caste polarity and display led to a distinct divide in the society, with formation of the two distinct caste groups as Brahmins and non-Brahmins. The masses, Bahujan Samaj, that have been devoid of humanity for centuries, and a handful who take their pleasure, call themselves superior and live at the cost of the masses. One's welfare is another's misery. That is their connection. Thus, Omved argues the non-Brahmanical perspective looks at this dichotomous caste structure as oppressive for the non-Brahmin. It also opposes the social, political and economic domination of the caste elites in society and questions the cultural hegemony of Brahmanism. Mahatma Phule is one of the important revolutionary philosopher and activist who theorized on the non-Brahmanical perspective. According to Phule, Brahmanism was historical, constructed over time, and was based on the ideology of oppression and dominance. Phule's writing and theorization is Shudra Ati-Shudra, rewriting of history, whose purpose is subversion and destruction. Phule's canvas was broad, where he rejected the view that the sufferings of the lower caste were the product of the social system supported by all except the untouchable caste. Phule identified and theorized on most of the question of his time: religion, Varna, ritualism, agriculture, peasantry and gender. One has to identify Mahatma Phule as a revolutionary and not a reformer. He did not believe in tinkering with some aspects of the structure, Omved argues, but wanted to smash up the entire oppressive structures, ideological and material. The module has 5 sections. Section 1, Understanding 19th Century, Mahatma Phule. Section 2, Dharma and Caste, Mahatma Phule. Section 3, Women and Education, Philosophy of Mahatma Phule. Section 4, Agriculture and Presence, Mahatma Phule. And Section 5, Satyashodhak Samaj and Non-Brahmin Movement, each dealing with different aspects of Phule's analysis. This is followed by the conclusion. Section 1, Understanding 19th Century, Jyotirao Govindrao Phule. This section would draw upon the life history of Jyotirao Govindrao Phule and establish him as a liberal thinker who was an activist academic addressing and theorizing on issue of caste, gender, education and draw its linkages with the period of the 19th century. Phule's ideas were radical as it was based on challenging the unequal social structures rather than reforming them, which was the agenda of many other social reformers of the time. Kumbhojkar argues that Mahatma Phule's contribution to the making of modern Maharashtra is seminal. Why is that? Kumbhojkar argues that Phule was seminal as he widened the horizons of identity, of exclusion and suffering by building a holistic vision which encompassed the aspirations of various oppressed classes such as the Shudras, women, slaves, African American. It is important to see how Phule in his ideology made it possible for all the oppressed to come together. Dixit argues that it was in the 19th century that one could see the presence of what he refers to as war of positions within the intellectual and philosophical realm. Within this realm, three positions were fighting for a hold: colonial, native, Hindu, Muslim, high caste and low caste. Thus, the ideas of Phule bringing in a narrative that excluded caste and class presented the evolution of a counter historiography that can be embodied in his writing. Why was this happening? The history of non-Brahminical sentiment was seen as a product of the period of the Peshwa state and the institutions of colonial bureaucracy, which had further empowered Brahmins as witnessed in Maharashtra. The conservative Brahmins insisted that there could be only two castes in the social world in the Kali Yuga, that of Brahmin and the Shudra, without any intermediate Varna category. The late 18th and the early 19th century demonstrates the essence of such intellectual arguments in Maharashtra. The Brahminical domination led to the oppression and exploitation of the non-Brahmins at the hands of the educated Brahmins. It was in relation to this social condition that Phule and his peers developed their ideology of non-Brahminism. It was also at this time, Dixit argues, when Phule through his writings developed counterculture. Dixit argues that the 19th century saw Maharashtrian elite using history on one hand as a nationalist weapon to fight against the British and on the other as an instrument of creating and legitimizing their hegemony within the indigenous society. In this context, Phule's writings, which challenged the elitist construction of history, led to the birth of subaltern, rather non-Brahminic, in Marathi historiography. Further, Dixit argues Phule's severe critique of Aryan Brahminic tradition, his emphasis on the idea of Buddha, Charvaka, Kabir, Tukaram and Shivaji, and the glorification of Bali Raja, a pro-people ruler, reveal the role of an organic intellectual aiming at creating counterculture. India during the 19th century was a period which saw the beginning of a challenge to the upper caste domination in society. Phule noted that caste oppression, gender inequality, caste hierarchies, and racial injustice were deeply interconnected. Phule theorized on issues of education, especially rights of low caste and women to have equal access to it. He debated on how to address problems inflicting agriculture and the rights of the peasants, and also addressed the notion of stigma attached to widowhood and demanded for the removal of untouchability. Phule focused on addressing the patriarchal and Brahminical ideological structures which he believed led to the marginalized status of the Bahujan and the woman. Thus, his ideology of social revolution had a peasant and an anti-caste outlook. Phule believed in democratization of education system as one of the important ways to address the problem of inequality and exploitation. Towards this aim, he first taught his wife, Savitribai Phule, who became his steadfast partner in this crusade against injustice. Towards realizing this goal, Phule opened the first school for girls in India, further challenging caste rules of purity and pollution. Phule and Savitribai were the first of the families to allow access of people stigmatized as lower caste to their wells to draw water, started a shelter home for child widows and an orphanage for orphan children. In September 1873, Phule along with his followers formed the Satya Shodhak Samaj, Society of Seekers of Truth, a non-political body to attain equal rights for peasants and the lower caste. Phule is regarded as an important figure of the social reform movement in Maharashtra due to his immense contributions in the field of caste politics, women empowerment and education, as well as upliftment of the peasantry. Omvet argues that such an ideology was the first non-Brahminic expression of social revolution. What was the non-Brahminic approach towards social revolution based on? Phule's objective was to attack the foundations of the existing systems such as caste and its related socio-economic, political, cultural systems without which no real reforms can take place. Unlike other reformers, the source of reference for Phule were the peasants in Maharashtra, and he believed that the grassroots have to change so as to alter the social structure which was oppressive towards the non-Brahmins especially. Omvet argues that such an approach had a peasant and anti-caste outlook. Omvet states that in terms of India, Hindu culture and caste system rested upon Brahminism. Hence, hence Phule, who aimed for a complete destruction of caste, superstition and inequality within Indian tradition, linked his thought with a movement of opposition to Brahmana elite. Non-Brahmanism in India therefore represents not simply communalism or a result of British divide and rule policy. It represents a first experience of social revolution in India. In support of his ideology, Phule's literary contribution is immense. It is important to understand the political context of his writing. Through his books and articles, not only was he creating a holistic vision of social justice and questioned the lack of access to education, but importantly, through creating knowledge, he was able to bring right to the forefront the relationship between knowledge and power. A glance through his titles would give us an understanding about how wide Phule's vision was and enlarge the possibilities of the oppressed to create and recreate emancipatory visions for themselves. The books Phule wrote include Vidya-mitra, Chhatrapati Shivaji Raje Bhosle यांचा पवाडा, ब्राह्मणांचे कसब, गुलामगिरी, शेतकऱ्याचा आसाड, सत्यशोधक समाज, सार्वजनिक सत्यधर्म पुस्तक. Analysis of the writings of Mahatma Phule reveal that he made systematic analysis of the interlinkages. Analysis of the writings with Mahatma Phule reveal that he made systematic analysis of the interlinking systems of inequality such as caste, class and gender in India during the colonial period. The areas theorized extensively by Phule include dharma and caste, women and education, agriculture and peasantry, and Satyashodhak Samaj. In the following sections, the module will deal with each of the area and analyze his ideas towards developing a non-Brahmanic approach towards the study of society in India. Section 2, Dharma and Caste. Deshpande, in his introductory chapter from the book Selected Writings of Phule, explains how dharma and caste are at the center of Phule's thought. Phule's opposition to Brahmanism did not relate only to the Varna system but to everything within Hindu religious traditions. Phule opposed Brahmanism in totality as he believed that Hinduism that originated in Shrutis and Smritis were part of the Brahmanical attempt at creating texts which would rationalize inequality and thus perpetuating the dominance. In challenging the Brahmanical system, Phule rejected the fact that Brahmanical position claimed the Chaturvarna system to be of divine origin and thus eternal. Phule rejected this religious belief and the texts that justify such a belief. It is important to note that Phule was not interested in making the Brahmanical structure a little humane, like other social reformers of the time, but argued for its complete rejection and wanted to break down the Chaturvarna system that legitimizes inequality. In this endeavor, Phule sought to create a dichotomous conception of Hindu social structure where each of these classes are characterized by the relation of its members to the members of the oppressed class. So Phule referred to the two ends of the dichotomy as oppressed groups of Brahmana and the Shudra Ati Shudra. Phule theorized that Brahmanism was a religious and dharmic order which perpetuated, rationalized and made sacrosanct the dominance of the Brahmins in this dichotomous conception, whether in religion or in everyday practice or in politics and administration. Such oppression and dominance was established over the years through manipulation of knowledge, thus highlighting relation between knowledge, construction and power. Thus Phule structured Brahmanism as being historical, constructed over time and the ideology of oppression and dominance which needed to be opposed and eventually smashed. As O. Hanlon discusses in her book, Phule also challenges the thesis that God Vishnu took different forms at different times to save the world from catastrophe as referred to in the Hindu theology. According to Phule, it was the way followed by Brahmanism to dissolve contradiction between polytheistic ritual practices and monotheistic metaphysical position. Phule's first effort towards subduing the Brahmanical structure of ideas and beliefs so that a new, more equitable order can emerge is to analyze as the Shudra Ati Shudra rewriting of history. Additionally, Phule's writings on the Brahmanical gods and the history of Aryan race have to be understood in terms of this purpose. Phule, in terms of writing history, was rejecting the Brahmanical history and rewriting history from the Shudra Ati Shudra perspective. As O. Hanlon argues that Phule's aggressive attack is to be understood not only as historical necessity but inevitability of also as he rejected the view that sufferings of the lower caste was a product of the social system supported by all except the untouchable caste, which is evident from the play Vidya-mitra. Phule was not analyzing caste as a system of endlessly regressing hierarchy where there was always someone somewhere lower than the lowest, but as bipolarity of the Varna system in the Kali Yuga where there are only two Varnas, the first Brahmin and the last Shudra. Similar to Marx's analysis of capitalism by emphasizing the bipolarity of modern society between the bourgeois and the proletariat. Phule used this notion of a dichotomous structure within caste. Phule understands caste or varna in a relationship of power and dominance that needs to be attacked at the grassroots. Phule was of the opinion that the Smritis and Vedas talked essentially in terms of bipolarity, and by attacking the central element of the socio-religious system, caste system could be uprooted and destroyed altogether. This bipolarity for Phule also meant that other castes who were oppressed can come together and unite rather than maintain the divisions among them. Phule rejected the centrality of the notions of pavitra, apavitra, that is purity, pollution, aprishya, aprishya, pure and impure, and the main thrust of the Brahmanical dharma. For him, it was more of the socio-political power which the Brahmins sought in order to maintain the power position and hierarchies in socio-economic, political and cultural realm. Drawing on Phule, one can argue that the main emphasis was on challenging the exploitative and oppressive character of Brahmanism and Brahmanic hypocrisy. Phule perceived caste both as a category in the productive process and as something that facilitated dominance of Brahmins in the ideological sphere. Therefore, for Phule, it is critical that history gets rewritten from the perspective of marginalized so that one can get to the process of creating a self-reflexive knowledge production that is just. Section 3. Women and Educational Philosophy of Mahatma Phule. The importance of education is revealed from the poem written by Mahatma Phule, where he associated education with access to justice, progress and growth for the lower caste and women. For Phule, access to power and justice is possible only when one has complete access to education. The words of Phule include: lack of education leads to lack of wisdom, which leads to lack of justice, which leads to lack of progress, which leads to lack of money, which leads to the oppression of the lower class. See how lack of education can affect society. Deshpande argues that Mahatma Phule was fully conscious of the importance of education. For Phule, education can only be the powerful instrument of social revolution. Education can only bring social equality and social justice in the society. The essence of educational philosophy based on educated as a human right. Mahatma Phule emphasized on universalization of education. It means to accept and extend facilities of education to all irrespective of caste, creed, religion, sex and physical or moral disability. Though he argued for education to all, he especially focused on women's education. Through his activities and undaunted efforts, he tried to build foundation of women education in particular, and along with his wife started a girls' school at Pune. Later, he established 2 more schools and one specifically for girls of backward caste and class. Mahatma Phule believed that men and women are born equal and have equal rights. It is important to contextualize Phule's ideas with regard to women, as it was during the 19th century that women's position and questions became the issue of primary concern. Social reformers raised questions about the issue of child marriage, child widows and widow remarriage. Among the category of women, the Shudra, Ati Shudra women face more marginalization. The Bahujan lower caste, lower class women was always the center of Phule's thoughts and actions, as he believed that caste and gender are interrelated and that Indian woman is not a monolithic category, rather divided in terms of caste and class. It is evident from Phule's writing that he was sensitive to the fact that there existed diversity of patriarchies in terms of caste in India with varying degree of exploitation of women therein. Sonalkar states that Phule was of the opinion that practices of unequal marriage and child marriage led to untimely widowhood, adultery, which in turn led to abortion and or infanticide. Phule critiqued the double standards of Hindu Brahmanical patriarchy, which, while disallowing widow remarriage, expected purity from the woman, happily permitted remarriage for men. Phule believed that it was Brahmanical scriptures that legitimized inequality among men and women and justified marginalized position of women. According to him, Shastras and religious scriptures like Vedas, Ramayana and Mahabharata was based on ideas of inequality and justified the fact that women and Shudra, Ati Shudra should be denied the right of learning that kept women and Shudras in perpetual slavery. Thara specifically argues that Phule condemned the use of sexist word for women in these texts and held Brahmanical patriarchy responsible for such deliberations. Rege argues Phule's articulation of women's question stands out in its recognition of the overlapping and specific ways in which Brahmanical patriarchy exploits women of different castes. Drawing from Mahatma Phule's text Sarvajanik Satya Dharma Pustak envisages the ideal Indian womanhood needed in modern Indian society. Phule attributed sisterhood and brotherhood to all women and men. In his book, he has tirelessly used the term all women and men throughout. All teachers appointed in the schools included people from all castes and also women. Dhara states that the book has reference to Fatima Sheikh, who worked with Savitri Bai from the beginning after undergoing training in normal college, is said to be the first Muslim woman in modern school in India. Phule, through such a move, was challenging the Brahmanical monopoly of knowledge, which assumed that a person of the Brahmin caste was automatically practically fit to be a teacher. This he did through his praxis as well as his polemics. What was different about Phule's perspective of women's education? While the upper caste reformers were promoting education of women, they did not exactly have a woman's emancipation in mind, but were promoting a refined domesticity where women would be educated and socialized but still remain her domesticity. For such an idea, the reformers demanded for women's education to be separate from men's education. Unlike other reformers, Phule wanted a more inclusive education for women. Phule believed that British education opened up possibilities of education for Shudra Atishudras and underlined the inclusion of women. The starting school for Shudra Atishudra girls was part of his vision for social revolution. Widow remarriage was another issue taken up by 19th century social reformers. The practice of shaving the heads of the widows and forcing them to live as an ascetic life confined to the most burdensome household chores was prevalent among Brahmins and some upper caste. Phule again had a unique response toward this social evil. In 1863, they established a shelter for pregnant widows who could give birth with complete confidentiality and entrust their infants to the care of the situation. The gender perspective of Phule is one which links the gender caste aspects of social oppression. Such a position can be analyzed from his poem called Kulambin, where he highlights the details of Shudra Atishudra women's labor by comparing it with the privileged life of a Brahmin woman. What makes it interesting is that it also makes a subtle reference to the fact that even though Shudra man and woman work side by side, it is a Shudra woman who wakes up early and takes care of the family needs as well as agricultural duties, performing multiple jobs. Section 4. Agriculture and Peasants. Phule did not examine the question of farmers from an economic point of view alone. In his opinion, in order to free the farmers from the negative impact of Brahminism, the cultural, political and social aspects also needs to be examined. He believed that the farmers should be awakened and also develop self-realization of their importance in the social system, and thus he promoted the struggle for independence of the farmers and peasants from the exploitative social structures. Phule believed that the farmers were culturally, socially, politically and economically exploited in the hands of the bureaucracy and colonialism. These themes were evident in his revolutionary thought in the books like Gulamgiri, and he also critiqued the Royatwari system, a principal method of collection of revenue which was prevalent in the most of the southern India, where land tax was to be paid in cash alone. This was ruinous to the cultivator, exposing him to the demands of the moneylenders. Many farmers lost their land when they failed to pay off the debt and when the crops failed. In his book Shetkaryanche Asud, Phule has discussed many issues of the farmers. According to Phule, farmers have not been enslaved by the taxation policies of the government alone or the droughts that they face, but they are exploited from all sides in the name of religion, culture and caste. The reason why the farmer is caught up with this exploitative web is that he is uneducated. Phule emphasized that if the farmer has to be freed from this slavery, it is possible only through all-round transformation, where religion, culture, politics, caste, annihilation, education and agriculture are all interrelated and interconnected and cannot be handled in isolation. Thus, if farmers have to be freed from slavery, it has to be through a change at the grassroots level in society, argues Chausalkar. Religious exploitation of farmers. In all his books, Phule brought out in detail as to how Brahmins resorted to religious exploitation of farmers. Farmers were blinded by the superstitious belief preached by religion and was misused by the Brahmins by imposing various fasts and rituals to exploit the farmers financially. This exploitation continues throughout the lifespan of the farmer until his death. Phule felt that Brahmins were guilty of two offences. First, misguiding the farmers by overemphasizing on the ritualistic practices necessary for salvation. Secondly, without any hard work, Brahmins were thriving on the produce and efforts of the farmer. Phule criticized the Brahminical ritualistic practices and pushed the farmers to avoid unnecessary rituals imposed by the Brahmin. Cultural exploitation. Phule argued continuously that religious exploitation leads to cultural exploitation. Thus, Phule wanted farmers to be aware and educated about their basic rights, as they are the most essential human rights. As access to education was denied to all, many of the Shudras remain uneducated. Thus, if farmers were to be free from this cultural slavery, the only solution was to educate themselves. Phule believed that the farmers should follow Satya Dharma, a philosophy of religion of truth, and be educated and worldly wise. Exploitation by moneylenders. The peasants were also exploited by the moneylenders who charged exorbitant rates of interest for the loans taken up by the farmers. The moneylenders were supported by British government, who mostly belonged to Marwadi Brahmin and Gujar upper caste. Why did the farmers need to borrow? During British rule, farmers had to take loans in order to pay high taxes levied on them and also meet the daily expenses. When the crops fail, they have to depend on the moneylenders to pay the tax, take care of daily needs and invest for further agriculture. Phule elaborated upon these issues in details throughout his writings. Phule laid down certain principles and views, and he emphasized on positive change in the farmers' farmers' movement for development through the suggestions given for the government. His ultimate aim was to establish Baliraja's rule, or what he referred to as people's rule, a society for farmers and for the farmers' welfare only. Some of the suggestions which Phule made with respect to the condition of peasants, drawn from the analysis of Chausalkar and Deshpande, are as follows. First, he laid emphasis on breeding of cow and oxen and wanted the government to put a ban on cow slaughter as they are the main beasts of burden in agriculture. Second, Phule advised the farmers to harvest rainwater by building small munds in order to prevent rainwater and natural fertilizers to be washed away. Phule also wanted wells to be constructed where water can be collected and stored, and such initiatives would help to address the recurrent drought. To build this infrastructure, Phule believed that the state should take the help of army personnel so that a symbiotic relationship of police and army with civil masses could be developed, especially the peasantry and the working class. Phule was first among the social reformers to have argued and focused on participatory development, where locals should be involved in the development process as well. Third, Phule also demanded that forest lands be granted to the peasants and they should have access and control of it. Children of peasants should get professional vocational training as carpenters, ironsmiths and many other skills so that the work of at least 2 or 3 caste groups could work together. Fourth, finally, peasants should get scientific education about agrarian production and specifically designed agricultural schools so that they can increase production. The state should play a proactive role in improvement of agriculture and focus on reforms which would increase the role of state in political affairs. Thus, as described by Deshpande, Phule has emphasized on 3 main aspects of peasants and cultivators. It includes they were in relation to the actual production process, what the state can and should do for the peasantry, and the Brahmin conspiracies to deprive the peasantry of his meager income in the name of one or other religious ritual. Section 5. Satyashodak Samaj and the non-Brahmin movement. Satyashodak Samaj was founded in 1873 by Phule with support not only from renowned Brahmin intelligentsia but also Muslims in Maharashtra. Satyashodak leaders visited different villages around Pune, propagating awareness about religious and political injustice against the Shudra, Ati-Shudra and other non-Brahminical castes. The leaders generally fought against the feudal system. The ideology accepted the idea of lower caste backwardness but argued that Brahmins had combined to use their religious authority acquired over the decades and more recently acquired administrative and political power during the colonial period to perpetuate this division. Thou Phule focused on the actual production process, the role of the state for the peasants' upliftment and against the Brahmin conspiracies to deprive the peasantry of his meager income in the name of performing one ritual or the other. He does not speak of any exploitation inherent in the production process. The Satyashodak movement as well as Phule believed the peasantry to be an undifferentiated group which did not have further subcaste differences within the agricultural peasantry. For Phule, the entire peasantry was Shudra Ati-Shudra and victim of dichotomous socio-religious structure. There, Phule was the first social reformer who made agriculture and production conditions therein among his main subjects of concern. Further, the Satyashodak newspaper, Deen Bandhu, brother of the poor, was established in 1875 by the Satyashodak Samaj to highlight the problems of peasantry, the Shudra, Ati-Shudra and women. In conclusion, over the years, the issues have been raised by the lower caste across the length and breadth of the country have been concerning basic human and citizenship rights. In the pre-independence time, where nationalists were demanding a greater share in the colonial pie and later for complete independence, the lower caste had to protest and agitate for access to school, market, roads, right of the women to lead a respectable life and such issues. These daily struggles were not waged against the imperialists but against their own who had subjected them to atrocities on the basis of their caste. Phule is one such leader and revolutionary of the 19th century with a broad spectrum of work. He identified and theorized with the most important questions of his time: religion, Varna system, ritualism, language, literature, gender, British rule, mythology, conditions of production and agriculture and issues of peasantry. Phule not only analyzed the dichotomous structure of the society and identified the Shudra-Ati-Shudras as leading agencies of social revolution, but also was a thinker to systematically theorize on caste. According to Deshpande, Phule is understood as a social reformer but a revolutionary who had a complete system of ideas, who believed that Shudra, Ati-Shudra on behalf of the entire society will liberate the entire people from the oppressive structure of Brahmanism. Further, as noted by Deshpande, most historians of Marathi literature fail to refer to Phule in their works, which is strange, sad and ahistorical. Deshpande stated that while Phule tried to build a system of ideas that could look at the contemporary social reality in its entirety, unfortunately he did not see the contemporary missionaries were reactionary and conservative, just as the Brahmanas were. Thus, he did not ask the question that Pandita Ramabai faced: why and how were missionaries racist and colonial? Phule also had a soft position on imperialism and ultimately lost ground to the nationalist movement. Why was that? According to Deshpande, Phule was thinking about the future of India under British rule. He believed that British rule would bring about annihilation of the Brahminical system and thus depended on them to change the system. But Phule did not see imperialism dialectically. He did not see that the British ruling class were not kind to the lower classes and peasants in Britain. As suggested by Deshpande, Phule must be progressively and creatively read by moving away from his clearly soft position on imperialism. Thus, it could be understood that all forces which desire and need a fundamental transformation of a society are today's Shudrati Shudras, and those who oppose them are Brahmins. Thus, Phule's writings, works, and non-Brahminical approach saw caste oppression, gender inequality, caste hierarchies, and racial injustice as deeply interconnected. Phule led the movement against prevailing caste restrictions in India and revolted against the domination of the Brahmins and for the rights of the peasants, women, and other low caste people. In summary, when we try to analyze Mahatma Phule's non-Brahminical approach to Indian society, we as students of sociology can take away 2 or 3 important ideas. The first important idea is we need to understand that Mahatma Phule can not only be understood as a reformer, that also a radical reformer, but also as a revolutionary philosopher who tried to bring together conceptual category of Shudra Ati Shudra in order to understand how exploitation was faced by the most marginalized of the people. Secondly, in order to develop a progressive society, he believed that women have to be educated, and especially women of the lower caste. And because of this, he started many schools for women, and for him education was an important stone for emancipation. And third, but very important for us, is given the present agrarian crisis in Maharashtra, it would also be useful for sociologists to go back to Mahatma Phule's analysis of peasantry and agrarian conditions in order to analyze the lessons learned from that, in order to see whether we can understand the crises which are faced by the farmers in India today.